Hey, deserving listeners, Love is Blind Season 3. Let's rewatch Knowing What We Know Now and see what happens.
Thank you.
Just for you. First time I've ever got you flowers.
Oh, I love them. Thank you.
You're welcome.
They're very, very cute. Thank you.
I'm sorry that I'm the worst sometimes.
That's great. If you have never said that to your partner, then there's probably something wrong with you. You're either so perfect, which you and thus have never been wrong or triggered or unfair, or you're not aware of it, or the relationship, you don't trust your partner enough to say that. But in my work with couples and in my own life, the benefit to saying something along those lines of just like, hey, I'm sorry for who I am, not shaming yourself, but just like, I'm sorry for getting triggered. I'm sorry for my issues. I'm sorry for my part. If both people do that to each other, then it can do a lot. And there's various different apology moments, right? If only you did this wouldn't be great, because you would hope that both people would be able to elaborate more on the transgression and what they're working on, all that kind of stuff. But brief moments anyway of just like, hey, I know I'm a handful, or hey, I know that I can get triggered, or hey, I know I have my issues, and I know I can come across as this or that, and I just want to say that I'm sorry for being a jerk face sometimes. I don't want to be that way. And you mean it, and both people reciprocate, there's a reciprocation there, that can go a long way. For some people, that's all you need. You could have a huge blow up the night before, the next day, you both say, hey, I'm sorry for the way I came across it, or I'm sorry that I can be a jerk sometimes, I'm just really sorry for being mean sometimes, or saying that thing sometimes, I'm just generally that way. Because that's the other thing, is what he's saying is, he's not saying I'm sorry for that moment, he's saying I'm sorry for who I am in general at times, which we should all be sorry for who we are in general towards our partners and towards other people. Not that we should be ashamed of ourselves, but we should acknowledge that it's human to have issues and to get triggered and to have schemas and to have relational traumas and to misinterpret and to have distress and to be human. And, we don't have a computer between our ears. We have a mush of gelatin that is attempting to do a lot of things, and it does a lot of things very well, but it's not very precise, particularly when it comes to emotional moments. And so we should all just acknowledge that we have our flaws and that we can be jerk faces sometimes, and apologize for that sincerely. So it's great that he did that.
They're very, very cute. Thank you.
I'm sorry that I'm the worst sometimes. I'm really sorry that I hurt you, and I am sorry for not making you feel like you're the only girl in the world because I asked you to marry me.
And yeah, he even is specific. I'm sorry for not making you feel like you're the only woman in the world, and that's my fault. I take full responsibility for that. I am sorry. And it seems legit, seems sincere.
And then I messed that up. So
now, the key is reciprocation, as long as it's fair to do so. For example, for some situations, you wouldn't accept a reciprocate. If someone's abusive or completely unfair, then the other person shouldn't necessarily have to reciprocate, right? At the very least, they shouldn't feel like they need to reciprocate in an equal amount. They'd be like, well, thank you for apologizing. I feel like I was at least a little bit to blame, and let me apologize for that. But in a lot of situations, both people can't, who knows who's more to blame, it doesn't really matter, but both people can equally take responsibility and show remorse and look at themselves. When we do that, that's what I'm always trying to do with my couples when I'm working with them, is get them to a place not where they're criticizing each other, but where they're aware of how they come across to the other person, so that the other person doesn't have to criticize. That's why we criticize our partners, usually in conflictual situations, is because our partners are indicating to us that they understand the way they're coming across. Now, we could be distorted, we could be unfair, it's case by case. But anyway, so you'd hope that Zeneb would reciprocate in this moment and say, yeah, I'm sorry for being a jerk face too. I am overly sensitive. I'm insecure, as you know, and I'm really sorry for jumping to conclusions or being critical or dismissive or something. So let's see what she says.
I love you, and I am very, very sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, so she says thank you in a tone that doesn't sound super. Now, if she's done with the relationship, which is a good chance that she is, then yeah, she's done. She doesn't have to necessarily reciprocate. She could say, look, I don't really care about this relationship. I'm done. So whatever. But if she wants to work things out, if she wants things to work out well for the two of them, and even if you just want to be a good human being, even if you plan on breaking up, then yeah, at least from what we've seen on camera, reciprocation is justified here. Let's see if she does that. Now, of course, they're editing it, I think, or she is actually just staring at him quietly and struggling with something, or I don't know. Or they edited out that she did reciprocate. We will probably never know.
I'm very sorry, and unfortunately, just in the moment, I said what I said, and like, I think you and I have cleared that up to where it's like, you know that I'm happily engaged to you.
Okay, in terms of the way it's edited, she said thank you in a questionable way. It could have been a legit thank you, but it also could have been a dismissive thank you, a distancing thank you. And then he's continuing to apologize and be elaborate. If I was to take a guess, if the edit is close to reality, he's saying, well, he's in his head thinking, well, maybe I didn't really fully apologize because I'm not getting any kind of response from her. So, okay, so just be more clear and specific, and then maybe she'll reciprocate or at least acknowledge what I'm saying.
You guys have cheesecake?
Yeah, you're gonna love it.
Oh,
It's my favorite dish.
did I tell you that you look amazing?
Okay, so they might have edited it or something, but at least she is having some physical affection, which goes a long way. That could be communicating a lot in that moment. Hard to say.
I have moments where I am so sure about you. I have told 2 men outside of my family that I love them in 31 years, and I don't know how to tell you, but I do absolutely love your heart. Without a doubt, like in love with like the man that you are.
In lieu of knowing where this is headed, it sounds like she might be done or kind of done. That's the sort of thing you hear people, I don't know if I'm just reading into it, but it's the sort of thing that people say as a consolation, I just love your heart. You're such an amazing person. I don't know, it's sort of weird. Of course, you'd want to hear that from your partner, but there's a tone to it or something. There's like a looming but, if you will, no but, meaning you're such an amazing person. I just love your heart, but I don't want to be with you. So, yeah, and her tone of voice. She did say she appreciates the apology, but she doesn't seem to really be taking it in. She doesn't seem to really, imagine a different couple, even Matt and Colleen, if Matt were to apologize, you just imagine that Colleen would have a different reaction. Or if Zeynep had apologized to Cole, that he would have a different reaction. There's just a certain, distance. And I'm just going to take a guess and say that she was done with the relationship, which is interesting because the way that they talk about it, of course, she will contend that she was basically mostly a yes or a question mark until she was walking down the aisle at the altar. And then for him, he says that he wasn't really a no until a few days before the wedding for sure. I don't know. It's interesting. The way that she talks, it seems like, especially knowing what we know later, that she could have been done a long time before the altar.
We're getting married in less than 2 weeks.
You're the only guy for me, Cole, so.
This is like a real.
Yeah, I mean, do we believe when she says that? You're the only guy for me? Let's rewatch that.
Tell you, but I do absolutely love your heart. Without a doubt, like in love with like the man that you are.
We're getting married in less than 2 weeks.
You're the only guy for me, Cole, so.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm just reading into it, but that does not sound convincing.
What do you want me to lick right now? I made her laugh.
That's probably like my favorite question you've ever asked me.
Yeah, it's interesting when he says, I made her laugh. I think he really wants that. I think he wants it to be light. I think he wants there to be closeness, fun times, connection. I think that's him expressing that. Again, I don't know if I'm just reading into it. It's interesting watching this, rewatching all this again, that it could have been so different. Because it seems inevitable that they would have not worked out, but I don't know. Rewatching it, I think that at this point, I think it's mostly done, but there's so many things that could have been differently for the two of them, and they might still be together and happily ever after. I don't know.
Perfectly flipped.
Why don't
That
you
was
just
miraculous.
use like tongs or something?
Because that was more cool.
You like literally flipped it. Do you have it?
And then you looking for this?
Yeah, why aren't you holding it where the raw bit is?
You've been hired.
This was meant to be you cooking for me, babe.
So I'm reminded of how much micromanaging she's doing. It's hard to know exactly how he's receiving this, but I'll tell you, if I were in his shoes, I'd be annoyed. That it's like you're commenting on everything I'm doing. Everything's negative. I can't do anything right. We're not trying to deactivate a bomb in this moment. It's not a critical thing that you have to make sure everything is done exactly the way that you would do it. We're supposed to be having fun here. And then what I would end up doing if I were in his shoes is exactly what he's doing, which is just like, all right, I guess if you want to do everything and you're particular about it, then I guess I just won't do it. So yeah, I'm just reminded of that aspect to it. Now, maybe they have that way of communicating with each other. Maybe it's understood that she knows more about the kitchen and food and cooking and wine and all that stuff than he does, and that's okay. There are moments when you just sort of default to someone else's expertise, and maybe they're in that zone.
What do you charge per hour?
This is a very white, not seasoned piece of chicken. Please season it.
All right. Let me help you out there.
We don't need any more on this side.
Nope.
This needs 3 minutes.
It's also possible that he has no idea what he's doing and he is literally potentially ruining the meal, and she's just trying to make sure that doesn't happen.
It's steaming. Please don't burn the top of your mouth. What are these?
Oh, you found my... Check this out. I forgot to tell you.
Oh my gosh, with cooking chicken. What is wrong with you?
This reminds me, and it did at the time, of when Stacy and I first met. She came over to my place and she was using my kitchen to cook something, and she turned on the oven to preheat it, and then when she opened the door, discovered that I was storing a bunch of random pantry, like potato chips and other kinds of stuff, in the bag in the oven, because I never cook and I never used my oven. So it was just another place I could put things. And she turned on the oven, and of course you wouldn't think there would be something in there, and it all, the plastic melted into the thing. But it just reminds me of that. Yeah. So he has the Nerf ball things in the microwave, and maybe he puts it there because he never uses it, he never cooks, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Are you mad?
I'm not mad. Okay.
You don't know how to have fun.
Do you want some garlic salt?
I want you to be less
stress
ratty, miss.
I think you should.
Yeah, so in this moment, he's trying to be playful in his request that she relax and have more fun and be less critical, be less uptight. And so, you could argue that that's not the best way to communicate that, but there are worse ways to communicate it.
Wedding day, and it just seems like I'm getting two different versions of Zinab. There will be one day where I wake up and she's madly in love with me, and there will be another morning where she has all these issues, and I'm just confused because it's just hard to get a read on where she's really at. I don't want to force something into place.
Yeah, it's interesting. The more I rewatch this, the more I see that there's a good possibility that he was mostly in, if not entirely in, and wanting to marry her until pretty late in the game, and that she might not have been, or at least she was way more on the fence than he was, or he's just playing along, or he's just better at acting as if he's into it when he's not. I don't know. What do you think?
I'd make a decision off of the pods and off of the last 2 weeks. I'm 1,000% in. Even with you spilling chicken and Nerf gunning, like
You're
that kind of
1,000%
stuff.
in.
Oh yeah, off of the pods and off of the last 2 weeks, Cole. Yes, yes, I am.
The Nerf gunning, was that
The
bad of a
sale
negative?
date. Oh,
Now, sometimes there are random things that will just turn you off about someone. It could be the way they walk, the way they breathe, the way they smell. You know, attraction is attraction. It's hard to figure that out. So maybe the Nerf gun thing or his demeanor, his playfulness is just such a turnoff to her that it just is a turnoff, you know? But it wouldn't make a lot of sense if it wasn't in that category, and if it was in a category where she's just extremely judgmental or critical or something. So anyway, she's saying she's 1,000%. It's interesting, though, that he actually even brought up the question. I think he is frequently, in a healthy way, bidding for, do you love me? There's been a lot of that kind of questioning from him throughout that I didn't notice the first time through.
Cole. I have moments, Cole, where I'm like so sure that I totally am. But I, honest to God, don't think I will know until I'm walking down that aisle to you.
That's not what a girl who wants to marry me or is about to marry me is gonna say.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you're wanting to marry someone. You're like, so what are you going to say at the altar? I mean, one, you would never ask that of someone because you would figure that they would tell you if it was a no, or even if it was a maybe, at least, you know, non-love is blind situations. And so, yeah, she said, I'm not going to know until I'm walking down the aisle. And he's just like, wow, that's doesn't sound very promising.
If it comes to a moment where I know I'm not going to marry you, I will let you
Okay,
know.
see, I'm past that now. What I'm to now is, are you marrying me or not?
Yeah, he's saying, look, I'm past the moment where you're going to tell me the negative. I need to hear the positive, meaning I get it that you're telling me that you're not a no, which is one threshold. You know, that's half empty. I want it to be all the way full, which is that you're a yes. Are you a yes?
I do want to go through with it.
You want to marry me?
I would love
I
this to
can't
end
even
with me marrying
spill
you.
chicken without you thinking I'm immature or something. We can't get past 20 minutes together without some type
Well,
of
this
a
sounds
tripwire.
like
Yeah, it certainly looks that way, that there are very frequent issues, landmines, tripwires, things that she'll bring up as criticism, or she'll get upset about something. And yeah, it certainly looks that way. And so behind the scenes, it sounds like that's also what he's saying.
for me. I see you picking things up and I see you making the bed. And I try to always be like, oh, you took the trash out. Oh, you made the bed. I love it.
It's the way that we relate. I want a wife who laughs with me and builds me up and isn't
I do
pissed
laugh
and
with you,
ticked
and I do
perturbed
build
by
you up.
every little.
Yeah, it's interesting. So she's identifying the only barrier to marrying him is that he's messy and disorganized with his things in the house, and that he's silly and jokey around things, that he shot a Nerf gun at her in the kitchen. She's not saying anything other than that. I'm guessing it's a lot more than that in terms of why she doesn't want to be with him, but that's all that she's identifying, which points in the direction of what Cole would say later after the season, that Zenab never told him what was going on. So at least on camera, that's exhibited here. And then he cuts to the heart of the matter. Let's rewind that.
Oh, you made the bed. I love it.
It's the way that we relate. I want a wife who laughs with me and builds me up and isn't
I do
pissed
laugh
and
with you,
ticked
and I do
perturbed
build
by
you up.
every little thing that happens that isn't ideal.
Yeah, he cuts to the heart of it. He's just like, look, I want to be able to relate well. It's not about the fact that I'm quote unquote immature or too jokey or messy or something. It's the vibe between us that doesn't feel right.
So not fair. It is so not, that's so not fair.
I would expect my wife to just like me a little bit more, I guess.
How can you
Yeah, and it's. I mean, you could argue that that's a sexist statement of you're supposed to put up with things, but I think given what we've seen, we could imagine that at the core of this for him is he just feels like she doesn't really like him. She has a certain contempt about him, a displeasure, a distaste about him, and he gets that. He receives that. He doesn't hear it directly, but he gets that vibe from her, and it hurts his feelings and it concerns him about the future of the relationship.
Think I don't like you. How can you think that?
There's just moments.
What do you need from me to show you that I like you?
To not feel like I'm inferior.
I have never thought that of you.
Interesting. Yeah, so I'm reminded of this too. He's saying not only does it feel like you don't like me, but it feels like you feel like I'm inferior to you. The way you talk to me, the attitude, the way you micromanage, the way you talk to me, the way you talk down to me about things. And yeah, I could absolutely see it playing out that way for him. Now, I could see her feeling similarly with the things that he said to her for sure, particularly around, you're the bipolar one,
Okay.
What have I done to make you feel inferior?
Just the things in the kitchen where you're kind of like...
We have different cooking techniques.
Putting
That
me
stuff
down.
on time.
This is actually a pretty good conversation. He's being vulnerable, and she's saying, well, what am I doing? And he gives an example, and then she gets defensive, which I wouldn't recommend. She says, look, we just have different ways of being in the kitchen. Okay, but that wasn't how you approached it. What you approached it was, we have different ways, and my way is right, and your way is wrong. Having different ways would be saying, that's how you do it? That's not how I do it, but anyway, that's a different way. Maybe it's a better way than... That's just saying it's different. That's not what she was doing.
I want this more than anyone in this experience. My proposal means a lot to me. I know that you love me. I want to say I do to you. Just be sweet. Just be unassuming.
Be unassuming. Have you met women anywhere?
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that he word it that way. Just be sweet. There's a sexism to that of like, just be a subservient little girl who just doesn't complain ever. You could imagine that would be not a welcomed thing to hear from someone. So yeah, I would say, because I'm guessing what's behind what he's saying there might be a little bit of sexism because we've seen that in the subsequent interviews. But I think that he would be better to say something like, I just get a vibe from you sometimes by the way you talk and the tone and the sort of things you focus on that it hurts my feelings. It feels mean. I don't know. There's just a different way that you could ask me to change or a different way that you could react to me. And it feels like there's a contempt there about little things, about like the way I cook chicken. You just seem really angry at me, like you think you're better, you think I'm inferior, you think I'm stupid. I don't know, just the way you talk. And maybe I'm reading into it, but that's the way it feels, and it hurts my feelings. It really is diminishing. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells around you. Just say something like that. To tell someone, just be sweet. Just be nice. That's not going to be received well.
I'm not going to sit here and convince you. I am a great, great girl. Your family would be crazy not to love me. I am a catch of the century. I am.
Except for when you have a bad attitude. Are you bipolar?
Yeah. She, I think, is hurt that he is criticizing her, and she is trying to defend herself, saying, I'm a catch, I'm a wonderful person, instead of saying, maybe I am coming across inadvertently as critical, as overly critical. Maybe that's something to listen to. And she instead defends herself and denies and says that's not what's happening. You could argue that he's not doing a good job of communicating about it, but then we hear the bipolar moment, and in subsequent interviews, it was clear that he meant, when he says this bipolar thing, he thinks, and seemingly everyone he was interviewed by seemed to have a similar, so it's like this problem of misunderstanding bipolar, I think, is a much bigger problem than I even imagined, because everyone in my circle doesn't have this problem, to my knowledge, but he equates what she's doing. What she's doing, from his point of view, is that some days she's totally sweet and nice and accommodating and loving and, all that stuff, warm, nurturing. And then other days she's angry, contemptuous, distant, punishing, critical, micromanaging, just hates him, seemingly hates him. Other days seemingly totally loves him. And he calls that bipolar. It's not bipolar. Just say two-faced. People, please, unless you are someone who can diagnose, or if you have ADHD yourself, for example, you might be pretty good at seeing it in other people, depending. So unless you're in one of those two categories, do not diagnose people around you, because in all likelihood you have no idea what you're talking about. Bipolar is apparently complicated enough so that people have a completely different version in their mind. It's like people are walking around saying, I have a broken arm, when really they have a headache. I mean, it's literally that ridiculously different what he's identifying and what apparently a lot of other people think of. So there's that. Two, even if you think it's an accurate diagnosis, why would you use it in that moment? It's pretty upsetting. It's condescending. He's trying to hurt her feelings. I think in his mind, he probably is justifying it by saying, well, I'm trying to get through to her. I'm trying to get her to see the way she treats me. And, there are other ways that he could have done that instead of just the way that he's doing it.
We're having a very serious conversation.
What
so
did I
I'd love
ask
to
you
know.
just now? I asked you a question.
You asked if I was bipolar.
Oh, are you bipolar?
Yeah, and then he has that smirk. I think he's hurt and he's angry and he's being hostile. He's trying to get back at her because he feels rejected. This is a much longer conversation than we even saw, so I think he's been kind of worn down in this conversation and in others.
Are you projecting? You are obviously entitled to and allowed to think whatever you want. I've given you no reason to think any of those things. No.
I forgot about this. So this is the 2 nights before the wedding ceremony. So this is when Cole says, after I think the cameras go, they continue to talk, and he tells her, look, I'm a no at the altar, and she says that she's going to be a yes, or they agree that they're going to be both a no or something, but he tells her that he's a no, and they decide that they're going to date after. It'd be hard to imagine that Cole would really want to date her after the altar, but at the very least he disclosed that he said that he was a no after this point.
You want, go find it. Leave me alone for whatever you are doing with me, because I don't want to be here anymore.
Yeah, it stands to reason that they would both decide that they didn't want to be together at this point. Kudos to him if it's true that he actually did tell her. It stands to reason that he wouldn't lie about that he did tell her after this point. That's like, look, I want to be fair and I don't want to blindside you at the altar, so I'm going to tell you in advance what I'm going to say, because there's no sense in blindsiding you. How are we going to play this? And according to him, she was saying, well, yeah, we'll be civil. And then 2 days later, she was not. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.